And welcoming all of you to the 10th meeting of the Public Safety Committee. We have as our witness today retired Supreme Court Justice Mr. Justice Bastarash, who has co-authored a report called Broken Dreams, Broken Lives, the Devastating Effects of Sexual Harassment on Women in the RCMP. A very profound report and very, very disturbing report. Mr. Justice Bastarash, welcome to the committee. We look forward to what you have to say. Generally, we would ask you to speak for about 10 minutes and opening remarks, and we have fully the 2 hours with you. I apologize for the late start, but it is the new way of doing things when it comes to votes. So again, I apologize for that. Welcome to the committee, and we are very keen to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I was happy to receive this invitation because I think this report is very important. It's a devastating report, I think, for a major institution of our country. Everybody wants the RCMP to be what we thought it would be or that it should be. And this is more a call for reform than anything else. When I began to work on this project, I knew there had been previous studies that had dealt directly with the problem.
Excuse me, Mr. Justice Bastarash.
Yeah?
The interpreters are having a bit of difficulty hearing you. If you could hold your microphone up a bit closer to your mouth, it'll work a bit better.
Okay, is this better?
Excellent, much better. Yes, thank you for that.
Okay. So what I was saying is that when I began to work on the project, I knew, of course, that there had been previous studies, that some of them had dealt directly with the problem of integrating women in the RCMP. But I had no idea of the present situation or the measures that had been taken to remedy the problems discovered in those studies. The parties to the agreement said that the harassment was still prevalent and that I would receive 1,000 claims. I received more than 3,000 claims and know for a fact that many women who are being harassed, even today, did not file any claims. This would indicate how profound the problem is. But the more preoccupying issues were first that the harassment is systemic and it results from a very toxic culture. That the problem is so important that it put in question the ability of the RCMP to truly accomplish its mission, and that the harassment was so violent that it put in peril the health and security of thousands of women over a 30-year period. Many women that the assessors interviewed had been diagnosed with serious psychological injuries, including major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, panic attacks, and substance dependence. Claimants also reported a real lack of trust in the RCMP itself, a lack of trust in the men who worked with them, feelings of isolation, withdrawal from social activities, friendships and sexual relations, humiliation, lack of self-esteem, and lack of confidence. When you look at all of that and say that it is prevalent in more than 1,000 women, you would think you're in a crisis situation. What was also concerning was that the events described in these claims are not all historical, overtaken by time, or overtaken by updated policies. While the claims process did not review conduct that occurred after May 30th, 2017, some claimants disclosed that they were still experiencing similar incidents despite the initiatives taken by the RCMP to address gender and sexual orientation based harassment. Despite numerous investigations and reviews, excuse me, harassment remains present in many areas of the organization. Worse still, disrespectful conduct has been perpetrated and condoned at every level of the hierarchy. I often heard that there were many good members trying to do a good job in a difficult environment. And I'm sure this is true, and that many members are well intentioned and trying to do the right thing. But the reality is that even honorable members and well intentioned leaders have been required to conform to, or at least accept, the underlying culture, which they have, for the most part, had to adopt in order to succeed themselves. And the leadership and the membership have all suffered from that. I think there is a certain cognitive dissonance in the RCMP. Why? Because there are a lot of well-intentioned people who believe themselves to be ethical, hence systemic racism or systemic gender-based disadvantages and discrimination cannot exist in the RCMP. What they rely on is the few bad apples justification. This approach allows an organization to continue as it is, relying on the impression that simply finding these bad apples will solve the issue. They are not willing to recognize the systemic and cultural nature of sexual harassment and gender and sexual orientation based harassment in the RCMP. I have a list of the men who were accused of harassment and a list of those who were found to be responsible for harassment in the various grievance processes. These aren't a few bad apples. These are hundreds of bad apples. Now, based on the 3,086 claims that I have personally read and the 644 interviews that I, with the help of 2 other assessors, conducted, I've concluded that the RCMP is imbued with a toxic culture that tolerates misogyny, homophobia within its ranks and even within its leadership. The culture of the RCMP portrayed by the claimants is one of constant sexism, homophobia, gossip, and backbiting, where reprisals for rocking the boat and rumor mongering flourish. While many claimants took care
Point of order, Chair. He's on mute.
You've just
You're on
put
mute.
yourself on mute inadvertently.
sorry about that.
Oops, you're back.
Okay.
There you go. Yes. Just repeat your last 2 sentences, if you would, please.
Well, the culture of the RCMP portrayed by the claimants is one of sexism, homophobia, gossip, and backbiting, where reprisal for rocking the boat and rumor mongering flourish. While many claimants took care to mention that they had worked with some good members, they indicated that even these members often felt compelled to accept the prevalent culture and remain silent in the face of injustice. Sexual misconduct in the RCMP appears to occur with a surprising frequency from recruitment to the age of retirement. The assessors concluded, for instance, that there was evidence of 131 cases of outright rape that were reported, where only one person was actually brought to court. Lesser forms of sexual harassment and abuse, although all sexual abuse and misconduct is serious, appear to be very rampant. All candidates wanting to join the RCMP must first complete a 6-month training period at Depot, the RCMP training facility in Regina. Abuses started immediately at this stage. Many of the women the assessors interviewed joined the RCMP at a very young age. It used to be 19 or 20 years old. It's now around 24. They were often naive, and in many cases, the RCMP was their first job and their first time away from their family. Many recounted stories of being shocked by the language and open sexualized nature of the conduct they were confronted with at Depot from trainers, instructors, and fellow candidates. Instructors preyed on young women for at least 20 years there. Harassment was also frequent from male cadets who quickly learned to emulate their instructors. Women were told they were only there to have sex with the men. The assessors heard that over time, the atmosphere at Depot did change for the better. However, they still heard recent stories of sexual harassment and discrimination by male instructors. There is constant drinking to excess, sexual assault, and derogatory comments about women, and especially their place in the RCMP. Candidates who graduate from Depot must then complete the Recruit Field Training Program, a 6-month period in the field training during which a more senior constable is put in charge of training a new constable who has just left Depot. The goal is to train the new constable on the job, to teach her the necessary skills and procedures required to function as a regular member. The field coach is responsible for writing an assessment of the new constable.
Justice Bastarash, as hesitant as I am to interrupt a Supreme Court justice, we generally allocate 10 minutes. We're well over our 10-minute time limit. But if you could conclude, because I know members are keen to ask you a few questions. Thank you.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to say is that first, you have to go to field training. In field training, there was constant sexual invitations, you might say, from the leaders to the young women who were dependent on assessment by those people and were in a situation where they had no choice, they said. And then the situation didn't improve much when they start their new career in a new detachment, because at first they're sent up north, they're sent to regions where there are very few women, and often they're the only woman there. And that in itself creates a group of very vulnerable people. And there have been tremendous abuse in those regions. The other form of harassment, of course, is to deprive women of equal opportunity. And they have not had equal opportunity for training or promotion because there's no real career plan developed for the graduates of depot. I made 52 recommendations. I don't think that any of them would make a very fundamental change, but I think if you have all of them at the same time, it would. But you have to reestablish faith in the system and in the governance of the RCMP for anything positive to happen in the next few years. Thank you.
And thank you again for your report. And before I call on my colleagues, I wanted to reference not only your report, but your conclusion of your report, where you do not see anywhere forward without some form of sustained independent external pressure. There are measures that may be taken to address specific issues, but I'm not confident this will correct the fundamental problems of the RCMP. In my view, the time has come to ask hard questions about the structure and governance of federal policing in Canada. The past has demonstrated that change cannot come from within the RCMP. There must be a rigorous review of RCMP, followed by changes that will ensure federal policing is delivered efficiently in a manner compliant with the Charter value of equality with the Government of Canada's commitment to gender equality, including in the workplace. You may or may not know, Justice Bastarache, that this committee has been conducting a study on racism in policing. It does bear uncanny echoes to some of the testimony that we have heard. And I'm going to turn it now over to colleagues, but from the chair's standpoint, this is a core question. We have had report after report after report. We've had the commissioner here multiple times. We've had the minister here multiple times. In fact, we've had several ministers here. And you are really calling into question the whether this can actually be fixed. So I'm not going to ask you to respond to that, but that from the chair's standpoint is the core question that needs to be asked. And with that, I'll ask Mr. Motz. You have 6 minutes, followed by Madame Demoff, Michaud, and Mr. Harris. 6 minutes each. Mr. Motz.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to, on behalf of the committee and certainly my colleagues, we want to thank you, Justice Bastarache, for your work and for the assessor's work in this incredibly troubling exercise you've gone through in the report. I want to touch on a couple of things in the time that I have, sir, and I want to quote you from some of the grievances that have been laid out. And I quote, I have significant doubt that the 2014 amendments to the regulations of the RCMP Accountability Act and the RCMP Act in Chapter 4 will address the issues that the other assessors and I have seen, the procedures that are very much based on an internal mechanism with decision-making responsibilities delegated to a relatively low level with little independent oversight, end of quote. Second, another quote, most women said they would never use the harassment and grievance complaint system because they simply have no faith in its efficacy or fairness. And you list three main issues that were repeatedly mentioned by the claimants: their lack of fairness, a fear of reprisal, and failures to implement any punishments. Complaints are more detrimental to the victim than the abuser and the harasser, and filing a complaint would have individuals labeled as troublemakers and complainants. And in many cases, the complainants were unfairly targeted with criminal charges. And in some cases as well, the higher number of harassment complaints against the supervisory member, the bigger the promotion he will get. Obviously, we have a problem. And could you just walk us through in just a couple of seconds exactly? So if I'm a member of the RCMP and have a complaint against another member of the RCMP, supervisor or otherwise, what's the mechanism I go through to make that complaint known?
Well, right now there are a couple of grievance processes. One of them is specifically for sexual harassment, and this is the new approach. The other one, of course, is to use the code of conduct and have an inquiry under the Code of Conduct. But what happens is that they're officers of the same region that are appointed there to hear the griever. There may not be a direct conflict in the sense, that it's someone of her family or something. But what the women say is that there's a boys' club and they defend their friend. And basically, it becomes an unfair process because of that. The other thing is that they don't follow their own rules. If there's a rule that says you have to have a report within 3 months, some of them have been waiting 3 years. And some of them never got a copy of the report. The two main things are that there is no effective punishment. And if there is no punishment, basically, it'll continue. But also they're doing like a lot of people have said, like the Catholic Church, they just moved them to another parish. And I have a list of people who've been found guilty up to 15 times. Those people have been promoted.
Thank you, Justice. I know we could go on and on. I want to get to a couple other points that I think are critical that we need to delve in today as well. Obviously, as you've described, I guess I'll ask you a simple yes or no. Would you, in your assessment then, the apparent flawed process that you've just described contributes to the issue we're discussing here today?
Yes, absolutely.
So if that's the case, I'm just gonna. What are your recommendations? And I was intrigued by many of them. You say, and I paraphrase, that we create an effective, external, and independent body to which RCMP employees may report sexual harassment or misconduct, which has the power to investigate and make binding findings of fact and recommend penalties. Now that's a laudable recommendation, but how do you actually see that playing out in the practical or operational terms, sir?
Well, you can design the committee to be formed by people from other police forces or other regions, or people who are not RCMP but have some experience with policing. And basically, those people would have the power to investigate. I think they should also be able to start investigations without a complaint when they know something going on in a district.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's
the other one. But the main thing is retribution. If a woman complains, whether she wins or loses, there will be retribution. And this is why even a very good committee is not going to receive a lot of complaints because of the retribution.
So my question then, you've talked about it, you mentioned 3 or 4 times already in your opening remarks and in my questions, but and I quote you from page 47 of your report, it became clear that several men at every level of seniority repeatedly harassed or sexually assaulted women. This is criminal. We're not talking, this is criminal behavior. Criminal behavior.
In many, many cases, yes.
And so you have a list of who these people are.
Yes.
Have any of these repeat offenders been identified to authorities to investigate that you're aware of?
Well, not by me, but some of them have been identified by the women who were assaulted, and in a few cases by men who were witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Motz. We're going to have to leave it there. Madame Damoff,
I thought you'd
6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and Mr. Justice Bastirat. I just cannot thank you and the team that worked with you enough for putting this report together. I had trouble reading it. I couldn't read it all in one night because it upset me so much. I can't imagine what you folks went through doing the interviews and preparing for it. And the committee has heard me use this comparison before, but a couple of years ago, I read a report on the Edmonton Institute, the Edmonton Max, about the issues they were having there with sexual harassment, and they compared it to the 1950s movie The Blob. Many of the people who become part of it are good people, but helpless against its power. How do you get rid of something so all-consuming? And I couldn't help but think as I read your report exactly the same thing. And so you've made 50, all these recommendations. Do you think that the RCMP has the ability to implement those recommendations? The minister has come out publicly and condemned what has happened, and I know that he wants to see things change, but is the RCMP able to do this and fix what's going on there?
The real problem is that the women are not confident that it can be done because there have been 15 reports before, and every time the RCMP said they accepted the recommendation, and they did make some changes, but they were mostly policy changes and organizational changes. But what the women want, of course, is for the men to be accountable for what they're doing, and the managers, the supervisors who are not supervising, to be sanctioned also. It can be done if there is real leadership. It can't be done by a single person. I think a lot of the women would be willing to support strongly the commissioner if they saw her take really drastic action. And I think some of the men who've been hiding would come out and play their role in putting together a team. You shouldn't have, the RCMP divided into women policemen and men policemen. It should be one single team. And it's wrong, I think, to continuously say, oh, this is the woman corporal or the woman supervisor. Why do we say that? Because we're making a distinction, and the women feel that they're being undermined by that.
I wanted to ask you about the RCMP Management Advisory Board. You talked about accountability. As we've been studying systemic racism, that's something that's come up over and over and over again, is the lack of accountability and lack of consequences for officers who are not acting properly. I just read an article today. Robert Gordon, who's from Simon Fraser University, said that the RCMP is, and I quote, addicted to secrecy. The Management Advisory Board, do you think that their reports should be made public? And also, do you think they should be made available to the minister?
Yes, I do. I think there has to be. I never saw the report. I asked for it because how do you want me to have an idea whether these people know what's going on and are willing to put some pressure on the administration to resolve the issue? Why do we have an advisory board if nobody knows what it's doing? I don't see that as a issue.
And I noticed the chair of the advisory board in that article was very evasive in the answers to the questions and just said, you'll have to ask the RCMP. So as to why they weren't made public. I am just so troubled, going back to what my colleague Mr. Motz was talking about. 130 women disclosed sexual assaults with penetration. How on earth could that happen and there be no consequences for those people? It's mind-boggling to me.
Well, the fact that this did happen created a total loss of confidence in the administration, in the sense that it was supervising and.
En ceci que l'administration supervisait, surveillait et devait assurer.
Picked in. Something's wrong here.
Yes, the French interpretation just overrode the English.
Yes, it is working.
Okay, let's go back. Just continue on. We'll see whether we're back on.
It seems to be okay with you
Yeah.
speaking, Chair.
Okay.
I guess this isn't just a matter of consequences for that employee within the RCMP. These are things that also should have criminal charges laid.
Oh, yes, and some of the women asked me whether I could do something. But I said, when it's criminal conduct, it's for the victim to. And I said, look, you've participated in this process, but you can still lay a criminal charge. But they say, oh, even if I do, even if I win, I'll lose in the end because I'll lose my job. I'll lose my job because I'll be, attacked by everybody who's.
So this is so typical of women who are survivors of sexual violence, where they're the ones who are penalized and the perpetrators continually get away with it. Your report is one of the most troubling things I've read in my life.
Well,
I'm off.
this is why it's written this way. I think there has to be some action taken right now and some action of consequence. I'm happy that the commissioner has committed to do these things. She just has to create some kind of way of getting the good people in the RCMP behind her.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Madame Michaud. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Justice Bastarak, for your considerable work and your very disturbing, difficult to read report, especially for a woman. You're speaking of this boys' club toxic culture, which is within the RCMP and also within its executive orders. And this seems to be a message being sent to women who do want to join police forces that this is a boys' club, they're not welcome, and this is the sort of thing that will happen to them if they dare take this career step. This is most unfortunate. As you say in your conclusion, it will take a deep change to change this toxic environment, toxic culture, and this will need to be imposed from the outside. We've seen many reports, many studies on this topic, administrative changes, various changes. Nothing's really made a difference. Let me go back to the matter being brought up by the chair a little earlier. Where can that change be imposed from? Who can be in charge of this? What I've been told is that the government and the minister in charge are only interested in financial matters. How much will this cost? How much money is needed to solve this? Is the problem due to underfunding? Money, money, money. But based on what I've heard, there's never an in-depth debate on the matters that I've laid out before you. Of course, there's a financial cost, hundreds of women being put on long-term leave. Besides that, you've trained all these people and they're taking retirement at 40 years of age because they can't stand their work. So there is surely a financial aspect to this issue. But how should the government proceed? First, they will have to become better informed about what's actually going on. And they will have to insist on reform that really goes to the core of the matter. Thank you. Speaking of money, your report mentions $125 million in indemnities that have been given to women to compensate for the damage to them. There are a number of compensations from $10,000 to and up. So the system seems to be working better than the way you were describing earlier, a woman complaining or putting in a complaint. So it looks like this approach that you've offered them is better structured than what they had before. Taking this money to compensate them, it's quite, of course, acceptable that they should be awarded compensation, but it seems to be a way the government is going about trying to pull out the checkbook to look good, but not necessarily solve the problem. So how are we going to solve the problem at the training level? How can we use money to ensure that these things don't take place in the first place? We don't have people abusing of their power within the RCMP. I'd like to hear what we can do better with the money. I think that management will have to be reformed in depth. You'd have to begin by drawing up a career plan for each and every member, but also demonstrate that these people do wish to manage. And to manage, you need to have a set of values. You need to be able to communicate with the people who depend on you. Thus, people will feel that they're part of a coherent team and they will want to carry out reform. But if you don't trust the people leading you, if you don't trust your leaders, because a number of people at lower ranks of the hierarchy or various ranks of the hierarchy have abused of their power, at that point it's difficult to do anything with an organization. It's also difficult in any large organization to identify all the guilty parties within the management or to do that quickly. It's executive reform is a major undertaking and will take many years.
On a reçu des témoins.
Perhaps a quick question to end. We've heard witnesses
Qui disaient que
when we undertook a look at racism in police services, who said that perhaps the RCMP should be managed by someone else, or the commissioner should have more reports to file. We know that this is the sort of criticism that she has sustained in the last few months. What do you think? Does the minister have too much to manage? I'm not fully informed on the various activities of the minister and their responsibilities, nor on how their office and workforce are organized. But my opinion is that the government needs to get involved in greater depth in a reform which must be carried out. I think that we needn't necessarily break down the organization itself, the RCMP, and create several rather than one organization, but there might be specialties. You might have a distinct federal police force that would have contracts with municipalities and provinces. I don't think that we can, you can be in a general police force in a municipality working with them and then the next morning rushing off to handle a major cyber criminality issue. So that's why you need clear plans. You have to train people. You need to create specialties. If
des candidats ont une formation universitaire.
Insisting at least that they do have university training rather than merely high school.
Please. Mr. Harris. You're on mute, Jack.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Justice Bastarache, for your work on this report and for your comments here today and for your work in assisting the assessment. I first of all want to say that I have great, I want to pay a tribute to Janet Merlo and Lillian Davidson for bringing forth this class action lawsuit, but I think I'd also want to note and their perseverance and courage in getting to the point of a settlement. But I think we should recognize that what you were dealing with was a subset of all the problems. There was a class defined by a certain period of time and a certain number of people and kind of incident specific types of incidents. So we don't have the whole history. We're not looking at the whole history of complaints. And I think that's kind of important. And you were just assessing those who came forward, indicating that there were others who did not or did not wish to for various reasons. But I have to say that your report and the overall feeling, like Ms. Danoff, is very depressing to read and very hard to imagine how this could be fixed when the people who are, many of the people who are involved in this assessment and those who perpetrated the harassment are still there and still in the force. Can you actually have an outside process whereby people could complain and be able to have an assessment done as a resolution to this? You said there's still room for reprisals. There still has to be basic changes in the force itself. If it's not possible for that to be done by the, and you don't have confidence that it can be done by the those who are still there, how do we fix it?
Well, I think there is the possibility of establishing a grievance process that is that works. The problem is you've got to have confidence in the process and confidence in the fact that there will be punishment of those that are responsible and that there will not be any retaliation. So those elements are within the RCMP. They can't be outside the RCMP. To establish that confidence and to make sure that there is no retribution afterwards.
You mentioned several times that there were some serial harassers, multiple victims of a particular one or more individuals, some of which were promoted and are still there. And we had one survivor of this harassment indicate to me that they're still there and that you do have a list. You've said that several times, that they may be up in very high ranks in the force. Should something be done with that list? It sounds like you're inviting us to ask you to help maybe these individuals ought not to be there anymore. I noticed in your recommendations that you suggest if someone who was found to have been engaged in harassment, they should be punished. But if they were found a second time, they should be dismissed from the force. You haven't identified people who have already been found to have been harassed more than once. What should happen to them? Should they be identified, encouraged to leave the force in some way or another? Is there something that should happen as a sign that there's an attempt to clear the decks?
Well, in my case, I can't release any of the names because that was one of the conditions under which they established the process. And the reason for that is they said that if I were to give the names, well, then most of the women wouldn't participate. They'd be afraid of reprisal, and that it'd have to be a very open process for them to come in and do it. I think that it's quite easy to identify some of them because, as I said, when they're found guilty of harassment, they're moved around. It's easy to see who's been changed 3 or 4 times and has been in trouble 3 or 4 times.
So I take it you suspect that senior management of the RCMP is probably pretty aware of who these individuals are, and if they were serious about doing something about this problem, they will or would have found a way to get rid of them.
Well, I think it's probably not the case for all of them, but for some of them, for sure. And I think the more serious ones usually are more easily identified. But the women who spoke to me might speak to someone else now also. They may be less scared than they were a while ago.
The same individual suggested that there were a large number of civilian employees in the RCMP who at one time were allowed to or enabled to deemed to be in the public service and apply for public service jobs and be accepted. That appears to have been stopped and by the commissioner. These individuals who are still working for the RCMP are in that culture, having been already having the traumatized and be still in the same culture have a chance to get out. Would that be something that you would favor as at least an opportunity for them to get away from this culture if it's not going to be fixed, or if it can't be fixed easily, as you suggest?
Mr. Harris, you've gone quite a bit past the time, and that's an extremely important question. Mr. Harris will have a second round of questions very shortly, and if you could pick up the answer at that time, that would be helpful so that we can keep to some sort of time schedule. With that, I'm going to call on Mr. Van Popta for 5 minutes, please.
Good. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Justice Bass-Charras, for joining us today. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for your report. I agree with my colleagues who had spoken earlier that it was a very difficult report to read. And as I read the stories of some of the women, some of the complainants, I grieved with them. And it must have been difficult for you to hear those stories as well. But I can tell you, as a proud Canadian, I was personally offended, also because I've always been proud of the RCMP. When I was a young lad, my parents, just immigrants from Europe, raised us to be proud Canadians, and they would take us to see the musical ride of the RCMP. It gave us a sense of pride. Has that pride been misplaced? That's my question. And can the RCMP even be fixed?
You know, it's quite surprising, but I think that in spite of everything that's happened and everything that's been in the news and even the publication of this report, most Canadians still see the RCMP as a very important part of our democracy, and they believe it's or it can still be the best police in the world. They believe that, and in that sense, I think with the general public, it may be easier to rebuild confidence where it's lost. It's within the force that it's more difficult because of all the failures of the past to deal with these serious issues, and especially with the role and place of women in the force.
Yeah, no, I do recognize that, and you must be optimistic too, because you actually gave 54 recommendations, supposing that the RCMP actually can be fixed. But I read this in the executive summary on page 7. You say, indeed, there are strong reasons to doubt that the RCMP has the capacity or the will to make the changes necessary to address the toxic aspects of its culture. And that leaves me with a feeling that, maybe your optimism to actually give recommendations is overstated. What do you say?
Well, what I say is that it's very difficult because there's still in the administration a lot of people that are for the status quo and that don't believe much in the new approach. So they're going to be a stumbling block. But there are some who want reform, and of course the women want reform. And if you can sort of bring all those forces together and have strong leadership, over a few years, a lot can be done. But the reason I came to a conclusion like that was that if he failed 15 times, it's hard to believe it's going to work on the 16th time. Of course, you don't have the same people there to run the show, and that can make a big difference.
But wouldn't we be better off just to, dismantle the RCMP and, put in a new structure? Like the city of Surrey, which is next door to my riding, is getting rid of the RCMP, the largest detachment in all of Canada, and they're putting in their own city police force. Why not? Why wouldn't that be better?
Well, I don't know if it can be better, but of course, they will have a stronger grip on the policing that is being done there, and I'm sure. I think the danger for the RCMP is that if Surrey goes through with its project, there might be 2 or 3 or 4 or more municipalities that do the same thing, or a province that decides to establish a provincial police. And that, of course, would create a real crisis within the RCMP. It would have to
No doubt.
change its model.
Do we have time for another quick
You
question?
have 30
Mr. Chair?
seconds.
I was talking to the local officer in charge here in my riding, Langley, and he said that, and he was estimating the numbers, about 1,000 new graduates from the depot every year, but probably 750 to 850 retirees. Can't grow them fast enough. And now you're saying that we should put the hurdle even higher, 2 years of university. How does that work?
Well,
Well, first of all, I think there's been a change. The candidates are now, on the average, older and more educated. But I would put the bar quite high, because I think policing has changed, and that you need people capable of, learning new techniques and learning to work with the internet and everything that is based on science.
we're going to have to leave that answer there, Mr. Van Popta. Madame Kara, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Justice Bastarache, for being here, but more importantly, for the vital work on this report. And quite honestly, like my colleagues, I found this report extremely disturbing, gut-wrenching, and quite appalling to read. That indicates a culture of the RCMP being one that is toxic, tolerating misogynistic and homophobic attitudes amongst its leaders and members. I mean, one can't even begin to think that it's happening in one of the top institutions in Canada. And what's even more shocking is that there has been 3 decades of internal and external reports that have been delivered to the RCMP and governments, and quite honestly, shameful that nothing significant has been done. I think the path forward is clear that there needs to be a political will to respond. I think harassment of all types simply cannot continue. I think you've provided the government with the blueprint for that change, and I know the minister has condemned this as well. You talk about building confidence. How do you build that confidence, and what can the members of this committee, what can perhaps the minister do right now, immediately, to address this?
I think what has to happen is for the commissioner to establish a real plan for the reform, and to take some drastic actions right away. I mean, to change some of the structures or change some of the leadership. She knows, I think, who are the strong and who are the not so strong leaders at every level. I think people expect something, that they can see, and that demonstrates the will to take hard decisions and to move ahead, and then try and get people involved in the changes. And this is how they'll rebuild confidence. Now, can it be done? Well, maybe she I know, has changed a lot of the people around her. I suppose that she must have gotten rid of some of the people who were for the status quo. And these are the things, but they have to be seen. They have to be, because otherwise, if it looks too much like policy changes, nobody inside is going to believe it's going to make a change.
Yeah, thank you. You also dedicate significant attention to training, specifically at the depot. Many people declare that they were brought in into this, they were brought in to be broken down and then molded into something new. Is this at the heart of the systemic harassment and toxic culture, as well as the use of force? You propose educational requirements, better social media screening, and other measures. Can you talk a bit more about that and how that can be addressed?
Well, the people who accept the new candidate have got to be people who accept that the force has got to change. Otherwise, they're going to bring in people that are like them, you know, satisfied with the way we're training or bringing in people. And if we want to develop a career plan for everyone, it means also that there has to be much more attention to the way we provide training and promotions. And training and promotions are almost one thing, because most promotions are based on the fact that you have followed a number of courses and that you have acquired the abilities that are needed for the new function. And this is why, you know, I don't think it makes sense to have that kind of a program and then bring in people with only a high school education.
Mm.
They're just not going to develop rapidly enough.
Thank you.
You have a little less than 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'll be able to ask a question and get a response, but thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Madame Kara. Madame Michaud, 2.5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will go on the training issue. Mr. Justice Bastarache, you said earlier on that you said you'd prefer RCMP to accept people with a university degree rather than a high school degree. And the RCMP said that in that case, it would deprive them from having candidates from like women, people from visible minorities, people with disability, etc. Well, if they could do it in England, in Sweden, and in the US, why couldn't we do it here? No, I do not think that that's a real answer. It doesn't hold water. We are depriving ourselves of people who could help us if we have employment standards that are too low. If those people apply and cannot take on these development courses, we will have harmed the police force more so than helping it. So I don't concur with that. And does this mean to say that we'll have two categories? The ordinary people who have education, and then the indigenous people, recent immigrants who have no training, and then we do create a kind of ghetto within the police force? I would be very wary of that. But at the same time, the RCMP says it offers the possibility to their members to take on university degrees. But in your report, we note that some women that have experienced prejudice were told no to some promotions because they didn't want to provide them with the necessary training. Is there a lack of consistency between that the RCMP says and actually does? Clearly, there is a lack of consistency between policies and between the policies and the values of the RCMP and what's really going on. There's a weakness in terms of management, and there's a weakness within at the supervisory level. So those are two things that the Commission should be tackling.
Thank you, Chair. Justice Bastarache, perhaps you could answer, if I could state it quickly, should the civilian members of the RCMP, particularly women who are still undergoing trauma and are still in a traumatic environment in their view, be allowed to be transferred into the general public service without penalty, as they have been in the past?
I really don't know, because I don't know what impact that would have on their salaries or on their functions. And if they're transferred, there must be more change than just.
That would mean, apply to be able to seek a transfer, apply for a job within the public service without penalty, I guess is the question.
Well, I was told that they can now, but I'm really not
Well, maybe we should look into that. It's I gather it's been canceled for the time being, at least. Justice Bacheris, the RCMP and the Commissioner Lucky seem to have responded in some respect. If you look at their website, they show their Vision 150, and I think the Commissioner said this was in part responsive to the racism issues and otherwise, and the lawsuit. And you see a whole list of things that they say they're doing, and they mark them either completed or as ongoing, on track, and they seem to be proclaiming that they've solved these problems. They have a dedicated gender-based analysis plus team completed. The goal of the Gender and Harassment Advisory Committee is to provide the Commissioner with advice on gender, sexual orientation, harassment, equity, and inclusivity. Completed. A whole bunch of issues that are ongoing, on track. The RCMP core values are being reviewed and upgraded, all in the name of modernizing the police force. Are you satisfied that these issues, or that this type of approach is going to solve the problem, or are you skeptical? Have you seen this, or are you skeptical that this has actually been happening and is happening?
No, I have seen that, but it's in the form of a program, of an objective. And I think it's a very good thing, because it means that they recognize that there is a problem and that there are certain ways to deal with these problems. The difficulty they have, I think, is with this lack of trust. And the people who are going to be affected by these changes have got to believe in them, and believe in them means believing in the leadership.
Thank
So
you.
it's got
Thank
a leadership problem.
you, Mr.
Yeah.
Harris.
Thank you.
Madame Stubbs, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Justice Bastrash. I would just start by saying I'm frankly shocked at the lack of support for victims of crime at all stages, in all ways, everywhere in this country. And in many ways, what strikes me is that your report is also, in fact, touching on a lack of support for victims of crime in many instances. When you cite cases of rape and assault, no wonder there's a lack of trust and confidence when there have been 15 reports saying that over 30 years that these kinds of things have been happening. So I just, I would say I agree with your comment in the executive, or with your report's comment in the executive summary, that it's well past time for the Government of Canada to take meaningful and radical action. And no wonder there's a conclusion that it seems that change cannot come from within. So I hope that this is a reasonable question. Can you tell us if there has been a private response to you, or a response that gives you confidence for actual concrete actions for change from the person who is literally accountable to every single one of us, the Minister of Public Safety?
I've spoken to the commissioner, and it was the first time that I spoke to her. I don't know her at all. I don't know of her either, but I was impressed by the fact that she recognized the problems. She recognized that there had been a lack of leadership, and she told me of her willingness to address all of these issues, and that she was trying to set up a stronger support for herself in the central administration, and even in the supervision of the different districts, the big districts like the province. So in that sense, you know, it was a better understanding, I think, within the RCMP of what has to be done.
I'm glad to hear that, and I certainly wouldn't speak for her, although many people love to. I suspect through her long career in the RCMP, she may have experienced or seen some of these things herself. So I'm glad to hear that. But my question is really about accountability and the person who's in the ultimate position of power to actually make change after 30 years. So again, can you tell us if the public safety minister has responded either privately or publicly, or if you have any sense whether or not he's got some sort of concrete plan to actually make change? I know that he also condemned it. I'm sure we all appreciate that sentiment, as all of us here around the table also do. But what can be his job to actually fix this problem?
Well, I haven't heard anything from him other than the interview you talked about, that he a few minutes on television, saying that he agreed it was a very severe problem, that it had to be addressed right away, and he said he had confidence that the present administration of the RCMP could take control and fix things and fix this. So that's where he stands, and I think if that's the case, he's got to sit down with the commissioner and see whether she has the tools to do this. She has to have the budgets, and she also has to have some kind of political support if there are going to be important changes in the structure or the administration. He must give her support if he's going to say that she should really be responsible for implementing all the changes that are required.
Thank you very much for that response. And I would say that so far he's been shockingly passive in his comments, but thank you for setting out that roadmap of at least some near-term concrete steps he can take. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Stubbs. Mr. Iacchino, 5 minutes, please.
Merci, it does. Never mind. Never mind. I'm sorry.
I lost the minute right there.
Yeah.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Harris.
Are we starting, at some point, we'll be starting a second hour, I'm assuming. This is not it, is it?
No. What I
when
propose,
we get to that, I'd like to make a point of order, yeah.
Yeah, we have, you're a little premature in your point of order, may I say. And
Well,
let us finish with Mr. Iacchino, and then I'll make a proposal to the committee, which possibly will make you happy, Mr. Harris. Mr. Iacchino, we're going to restart you. 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, d'avoir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Justice Bastarache, for answering our questions today. Questions about your report related to the toxic culture in the RCMP. The Swiss cheese model was created by Professor Jens Rissen. It was also talked about by Ian Mackay to fight the pandemic. This theory says that one type of intervention is not enough. Each individual measure has loopholes. This is why we need many cheese slices. That way, the cheese will be better. The more layers there are, the more protection there is, and the fewer loopholes there are. So, according to that model, could you tell us what would be the top 5 or top 10 recommendations? And despite some loopholes, how those recommendations could help to fix the system? If you need some time to think about the answer, you could let us know later, but do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, I was just looking at the list of recommendations. You were asking me what were the top recommendations. I think the most important recommendation is to recruit the right people and have the right training programs. It's important for each employee, RCMP employee, to have a proper career plan. Besides,
in order to trust the administration, it is important that people who do not comply with standards or who commit harassment are punished. Also, supervisors who are supposed to supervise and do not do anything when they just dismiss any complaints, well, those supervisors should be sanctioned as well. Other point. I think the police force might need to be reorganized. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense to recruit people, to train them to do general tasks and then ask them to do specialized tasks. I think that currently training is disorganized. However, I do think it's important for the police force to have specialized areas. We need a federal police force that deals with federal law and has the resources to enforce the law. And as for the provincial police force, they should deal with provincial law. You know, we cannot just put everybody in the same bag, like saying, well, let's say a woman of a certain size and a guy of another size can do the same thing. Maybe not. So, in your opinion, do you think that a advisory board with gender parity will be better rather than having a unique commissioner? Do you think that will be a solution? I think we do need a commissioner that needs to be in charge. Now, that doesn't mean we do not need an advisory board. The advisory board was reformed by the commissioner. I know there are people from visible minorities that are part of that advisory board, so changes are ongoing. I do not know what would be the best model for the RCMP. I mean, I'm not a specialist in police force. Now, I've heard Thank you.
Microphone up a bit. Yeah, thank you very much again. Colleagues, that completes 2 rounds. I first of all want to ask, we have the witness for another 45 minutes, assuming he can survive the questioning for the next 45 minutes. I first of all want to ask Justice Bastarache whether you feel you need a break, and if you don't, we'll just keep on plowing along. If you do, we'll suspend for a minute or two while we have a break. So first of all, are you in need of a break because you've been at here?
No, I can continue.
Okay, good. So colleagues, what I propose is to continue on with 5-minute rounds. And then if there's still time remaining, to have a 4th round, and we'll figure out whether it's a 2-minute or a 3-minute round, and that should take us to 10 after 6. Does that satisfy you, Mr. Harris? You're on mute. Jack, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Are you suggesting 5 minutes per party, not 5, 2.5, 2.5?
5, 2.5, 2.5.
No, what I was going to suggest I guess I was raising it as a point of order. What we did the other night in the Foreign Affairs Committee when we had the minister for 2 hours, the first hour was the usual, the first round, and then the second round with the 2.5 in the middle. And after the beginning of the second hour, we started from the top again with the as if it was the beginning of a meeting. And I would suggest that given that we're doing a double meeting with one witness, as we are with the Justice Bastarash, that we follow the same procedure and that we have a second opening round of either 6 minutes or 5, with all 4 parties having equal time.
Yes, I hear you. That is not a precedent for the Public Safety Committee. The third round had been contemplated at the beginning of the creation of the committee, and the third round was 5, 5, 2.5, 2.5. So that's what I propose. I expect that we'll be able to squeeze a few more questions in that way. So with that, Mr. Couric, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Justice, thank you very much for your work on this. It's certainly heart-wrenching to read the report, and I can't imagine the process of actually compiling this information. So thank you for your work in that end. And just to make sure that I do get on the record to thank all female RCMP officers, female police officers that work diligently, who have faced tremendous challenges, but to thank them for the service that they have committed to their communities, our country. That's something that I think needs to be stated, and the bravery, especially when saying that in the context of such a report as this. So I wanted to make sure that is on the record. I represent a largely rural constituency, and in Alberta, one of the jurisdictions where the RCMP is the contracted police force, and I know I've learned a lot of the similarities that exist in rural and remote areas across the country. There's significant challenges that exist in policing, and the rotations that go in and out of these small detachments. And I'm wondering if you could provide some context for the specific challenges that are faced in the rural and remote context that women would face in policing across our country.
Well, one of the things that has caused many problems is that they have put the new members, the young members, in areas that are far away from their home and far away from any place where they have strong social relations. So they're put in areas they don't know. They're put in areas where they're completely isolated. And if it's the north and a small precinct, they can have many difficulties, but nobody to talk to, and it creates a big problem. The other thing, of course, is that a lot of these women have children, and the system has not accommodated very much the women. We've talked a lot about the fact that they don't replace the women that are on maternity leave, and that creates a problem with the men who get more work to do to compensate for the fact that women aren't there. But there are other problems. The problems when the spouse is also in the RCMP, and that they don't put them in the same place, or that they put them in places where there's no daycare for their children, things like that. So all of the social aspects are very important if you're going to have women in the police that are satisfied with their working conditions. And it can't be just not to be subject to harassment, it has to be to accommodate the fact that, according to me, it must be very hard for a woman to be in general policing and have young children. Now, if you separate her from her social support, if you don't.
Alors voilà, si vous la séparez de son regroupement social, si vous la mettez ailleurs que là où vit son époux des mois durant.
Correctly.
Okay, are we back on proper translation?
Yeah.
Okay. You have 30 seconds left, Mr. Kirk.
My apologies, Chair. My internet just cut out, so I missed the last probably 60 seconds of testimony, and my computer seems to have restarted. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Maybe in light of the circumstances, Mr. Justice Bastarash would be prepared to repeat a little bit of what he just said.
My apologies. The challenges of rural internet. So Justice, if you wouldn't mind repeating about the last 60 seconds.
Well, what I was saying is that accommodating women in the RCMP is very important because they have problems that are unique to them when they decide to have a family. So one problem that has not been resolved yet, I think completely, is the fact that they don't replace a woman on maternity leave, which increases the workload of the men. And they resent that and they take it out on the women rather than the RCMP. But the other problem, of course, is that they move people around very much. And if you're going to move around people that have young children, it becomes very complicated.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, Mr. Kirk. I'm sorry. Madame Lambaropoulos.
Ms. Lambaropoulos.
5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I'd like to first thank you, Justice Bastarash, for being here to answer our questions today, but also for the incredibly important work that you continue to do and that you're doing and that you did in this report. Alors, vous avez dit dernièrement.
Recently, you have told us that recruiting the right people is one of the best recommendations that you have made. That said, you said that there are good people with the right values who are already members of the RCMP, but who have to change in order to move ahead in their careers. So we do have good people who have to change due to the people in leadership.
In any organization is created at the top by leaders of the organization or of the institution. And if the leaders had zero tolerance for these types of behaviors and attitudes, then the consequences for this would be much greater and it would happen less often. So what kinds of recommendations would you give specifically with regards to my comments that I just made, if the leadership is what really needs to change? And my next question will be on training, but I'll get to that after.
Well, I think you have to prepare people to exercise roles of leadership. You have to teach them how to manage people and how to establish priorities and deal fairly with people who want the same promotion or want access to the same training. And there isn't any indication, I think, in the system that we're preparing leaders. If we prepare them, they'll function better. If you put in people there that aren't really capable, I think our experience shows that they become bullies because they want to establish their power. They want to preserve their power over different people. They don't know how to manage, so they become rough and take decisions that without much merit. If you have one person like that, it's a problem. But if you have 100 people like that, it's a very different situation because then it's the whole organization that's sort of in jeopardy. And I think this is much what happened in the RCMP. There were too many people who were put in there who didn't have the qualities needed to manage and who abused their authority. And
Thank
that
you. And
first can be dealt with.
And that's why you mentioned that recruitment is a huge way to change what's going on. You did give a couple of recommendations as to what recruitment should look like and what the competencies of people should be, including a couple of years of university. What other types of things should they be looking at when recruiting?
Well, I think there should be some psychological testing to make sure that you're not really recruiting people who would be violent or who have difficulty working with women or who don't have any respect for the people they work with, whether they be men or women. The model that you give of a policeman should be different from what it was in the past. And I'm not sure that it is this way now. I think there is a people are conscious of the fact that there has to be a different outlook when you're recruiting people and when you're setting them on a continuum for training and obtaining promotions and then exercising leadership roles.
And with regards to training, as I had mentioned earlier, I'll be asking you about that. You had said that they try to break the cadet down in order to mold them into the RCMP mold and to instill an esprit de corps, which women are often not invited into. How can we make this a more inclusive environment for more women? And how can we, I guess at the end of the day, I believe firmly that we really change the culture when we invite more women, but at the same time, women are not treated well once they're there. So I wouldn't want to subject them to that type of treatment. However, adding more women could change things. So how can we make it safer for women, and how can we
Unfortunately,
ensure that more women
Madame
would want to?
Lapidopoulos has gone way past her time. You'll find that the chair is very harsh about these things. But very briefly, Justice
Especially
Bachrach.
for me, Chair.
The answer is to abandon this model where they break people down and then try to build them back up. I think it's to evaluate the qualities of these people, determine where they should be trained and how they should be trained, and develop a plan for their careers with deadlines and a list of courses to take and promotions down the road. And this way, you'll also have, a continuum where people, when somebody leaves, there is somebody there to take over that can do the job.
Thank you. Madame Michaud. 2.5 minutes.
Ms. Michaud, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. Justice Bastarac, you were speaking of maternity leaves, and having young children can seem problematic within the RCMP. That's just unreasonable. In 2020, the RCMP is going to have to fall in with reality. Even in politics, that used to be mostly a men's club where there is quite a different approach taken now. Maternity leave and childcare and so forth. So let me pick up on the cheese analogy that Mr. Iacono was suggesting earlier. You were speaking of the most important recommendations you've made. You've mentioned that penalties should exist for those who have demonstrated misconduct. What sort of penalty do you have in mind? Well, they are penalized already, but it's not very well organized. For example, some people are sent out without pay for a couple of months, or even with pay. on leave. And I think that when abuse is repetitive, people should be dismissed, not simply allowed to go out on leave. Especially if there is physical assault, then these people should no longer be allowed to supervise women. They should be placed in positions where they have no authority over women. I would also penalize the supervisors who let things drag on, who turn a blind eye to situations in the field. Often, it's said, or even they say, that they do so because they don't want a problem in their district, in their precinct, or in their organization, in an area that they are administering. Because if that's the case, if people complain, they will be taken to be poor managers. And this will affect their careers. B.
You're on mute.
Justice Bacheris, women in the labor movement over the years have made great advances in the cause of gender equity and programs to stop harassment within the workforce. And we know now that the RCMP is unionized and they have a collective bargaining process. Janet Merlo recently made a public statement that women in the RCMP ought to get involved in the union and work through the union to try and bring about change to prevent this type of harassment continuing. Do you have any confidence in that approach? Or I guess one might also say, why should it be left to them to fix it? Should it not be something that we should be able to, with outside pressure, make happen?
Well, one thing that makes you wonder whether this is effective is the fact that we were also dealing with women who worked with the RCMP but are civil servants, and they're unionized. And the ones that I met, I asked every one of them, well, isn't your union involved? Aren't they protecting you? Aren't they doing something? And they all said no. So I don't know if it's a problem particular to that union, but for sure, the women that I met had no confidence in their own union, not generally, but with regard to protection against sexual harassment.
Can you comment on I think you talked about training and what goes on at Depot, the militarization or the paramilitary structure, the chain of command, the lack of being able to jump from one rank to another, that you have to go up to the chain of command. What influence does that have on the ability of this system and culture to remain pervasive? And is there something that should be done about that?
The different elements of militarization, I think, of the RCMP are hard to define for someone from outside, because you don't know exactly what comes from there or not. But what I was told that is meaningful is that they say, there's the law, there's justice, but then there's the way we see it, the way we do things. And they keep telling people at Depot at a certain time, I don't know how long that lasted or how it is now, but they told them, no, forget about what you think the law requires. Think about what the RCMP requires.
Thank you, Mr.
That is
Harris.
the line there.
Mr. Van Popta, 5 minutes, please.
Good, thank you, Mr. Justice Bastarache. I've got a couple of questions around maternity leave and just the rules around that. I was quite shocked that a big organization like the RCMP would have such an unprofessional HR department. Now, is part of the problem that it was a civilian HR department? Would it have been better if it had been embedded in the RCMP? What are your thoughts on that?
What I was told is that a lot of the people who work there are not professionally trained in that area, and that that is one problem. And the other problem is that they seem to be subjected to a lot of pressure from different people in management, and that there are a lot of decisions that are being taken under pressure, and they may not be in the best interest of the force or the person subjected to that pressure.
So if I understood the comments in your report correctly, some women were staying at work too late when they were pregnant. They were being put in harm's way. Perhaps they were coming back to work too early, all because of concerns about job security. And I just wonder if those are directions that were coming to the HR department from above. It would seem to me that the HR department would be there to be a filter to stand up for the rights of women.
Yes, that's what it should be. And some women think that they can go to the HR department, explain their position, and get good recommendations or be heard before any decision is taken. But many others say that no, it's not real, because the HR department is there to service the administration, the guys in charge of the province or of the district, and that they're just there to sort of fill in the forms and make it happen. And what is true today is something I don't know, but I do know for a fact that there was a problem at a certain point. There might be a problem now, even if it's lesser a problem. But the solution is, of course, to have that service be independent and very professional. And there's no reason that can't be put in place right away.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I have a minute or two left, I just have a
2
question
minutes.
about the possibility for affirmative action within the police force. On the one hand, you say that women and people of the LGBT community and racialized people should be encouraged to join the RCMP at the recruitment level. But at the promotional level, you say that any decisions about promotion should be blind. And I can understand that the intention would be then to help women, right, to advance, but the opposite might also be true if it closes the door on possible helpful affirmative action programs.
Well, I'm not terribly in favor of these kinds of programs. What I think you have to have is equal opportunity. And if the recruitment is okay and that you have a sufficient number of women there and that you're doing a good development plan for them, you don't need affirmative action. They will perform as well as the men, and they will get the promotion if they're better. And I'm not afraid that wouldn't happen.
All right. Well, thank you for your confidence in women.
Thank you, Mr. Van Pompt. Madame Damoff, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. We seem to have turned to a lot of things around training, recruitment, but your report dealt with, 53 recommendations. So there were a whole lot of things in there. When Commissioner Lucky appeared last week at committee, I was asking her about your report, and I'm just going to quote her. She said, "I'm not speaking about an internal review. I'm speaking about actions taken internally to change the culture, to change the governance, to change the stewardship, and to change how we deal with these things internally." A few years ago, when the former Commissioner Paulson appeared at committee, my colleague Nathaniel Erskine-Smith asked him about the 37 measures in the report you referenced, that 2012 report, and he responded, all 37 have been done. So I guess my question to you is, do you think the RCMP has the ability to make these changes internally, or do we need some kind of independent external oversight and some kind of reporting on the steps that have been taken to ensure that they're done, because this isn't an easy fix. But you know, this is something that's been going on for a long time. So can it be done just within the RCMP, or do we need some kind of external provisions being put in place?
If the government has confidence in the commissioner, which seems to be the case, well, then they should support her, and they should sit down with her, ask for her plan, see if she has the sufficient financing to make it work, and support her if she has to make some structural changes, things like that. It won't happen if she is alone with her project. She's got to have confidence in her with the people around her, and she's got to have a number of men and women who are there to put in place all these changes that she advocates in being done. So things can be done if you have the right people and you have the means. The problem in the past, basically, is that they just had ideas. They had promises about what it should be, but they certainly didn't seem to have a plan to implement much of it. Or if they did, it was a failure, because years later, we still have women standing up and saying, we're still being discriminated against. We're not.
Commissioner Paulson told us he had a plan, and that obviously wasn't working. So I guess, having just been through this study that we've done on systemic racism and the lack of accountability within the RCMP, you know, and with that, it's the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission. Then we've got the RCMP Management Advisory Board. Most police services do have some kind of oversight put in place with what's going on. So you're saying that, like, it sounds like you're saying the commissioner can do this with the support of the government. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that the only possibility for her to have success with her plan is with that kind of support. So if the government decides, yes, we're going to depend on her to do it, well, they can step in there and support her. If they want to change things and put, I don't know, a supervisory committee that has actual powers, it'll be a very different job for her. But they've got to make up their mind and act accordingly, I think.
I only have about 45 seconds left. You had mentioned about a future review of the RCMP as a policing organization, and claimants also spoke about it time to replace the RCMP with a more restrictive mandate. I wonder if you could speak about, you did a little bit on contract policing and what the RCMP should be involved in when it comes to federal policing.
Well, I think the federal policing, as I see it, is the specialized job where you need people with more education, more training, and that don't move around and change from one function to another, but develop in one area their expertise, and then they build on that, and they have leadership, and they have people who can come in and support them or replace them when they retire. And I think that's very different from general policing. But if they want to do general policing, it seems to me they shouldn't have the same people with the same training trying to do the effective federal policing and the municipal and provincial policing. Now, there are some people who like that, who want to do that kind of policing. Well, okay, hire them, train them for it, and let them do it. But don't move them around and put them in other functions where they're looking at cyber crime and things like this.
Thanks.
So that's what I meant. You could also, well, what a few women recommended is that you break the RCMP and create 3 different police forces with these functions. But you don't really have to do that if you're going to specialize people and create different
Thank you.
Within the RCMP.
Thank you, Madame Damoff. Colleagues, we have about a little more than 10 minutes left. I propose to ask a question myself and then go to a 2-minute lightning round, starting with Ms. Stubbs, if the Liberals could indicate to the clerk who they would like to have, and then Madame Michaud, and then Mr. Harris. So, Justice Bastarache, you are a scholar of the law, a well-established reputation for serious scholarship. The citizen policing is essentially a social contract between the citizen and the representative of the law. And so it becomes a little disturbing when you hear the phrase, well, there's the law, there's justice, and then there's the way we see it. The RCMP is literally sitting on hundreds of criminal code offenses within their ranks that are not prosecuted criminal code offenses. Have you given any thought to how this actually breaks, on a larger sense, the contract, the social contract between the Canadian citizenry writ large and the police?
It concerns me tremendously because I think it's not consistent with their role and their function. They should be administering the law, implementing the law, not trying to invent a parallel set of rules that suit them, and not prosecuting real serious criminal offenses destroys not only that, it destroys the moral obligation. And to me, you know, a good policeman has got to have a moral compass. He's got to know something about fundamental values. And I think that should be, you know, put in their heads at depot and nurtured after that. And what I was told is that the contrary is happening. People arrive there and they've got a moral compass that they got from home or their schooling, and then they're told, well, no, don't take that too seriously. We've got our own way of dealing with crime here, and we have our own definition of justice.
Well, both you and I are officers of the court, and we're sworn to uphold the rule of law. And yet here we have the chief law enforcement agency in the country routinely abusing the rule of law. It's rather hard for people who want to adhere to the rule of law, or for us to encourage others to adhere to the rule of law, to tolerate such blatant abuse of the rule of law.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we don't have the police we deserve if that's the way they think.
Yeah.
So it's not only what they're doing, but it's the way they think and the way they approach them that has been wrong. Like I said, what bothers me is that I know these things have happened. I know these things have been said, and they've been repeated to me by hundreds of women.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're fading because you're not holding up your microphone. There we go.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that I don't know exactly how it's changed, or whether, you know, today these things don't happen anymore.
Yeah.
The difficulty I have is that when I interviewed and when I met women, I mean, some of them had only been in the force a few years, and they were still there, and some of them had been retired for 15 or 20 years. So you get messages, but they're not situated in time where you have the continuum and know exactly where you stand today. But that's what the commissioner should be able to do.
One final question, and that is, you are sitting on, or you have within your body of evidence, which is not public, the names of those who are, if you will, serial abusers. We've in our study we've heard of if you will, badge abuse, where officers basically point to their badge and say, "I'm the law here, and too bad for you, and I'm going to do what it is I want to do." Have you made any correlation between the people that you know exist and have evidence of existing and their external conduct with the larger citizenry?
The big abusers, often in their case, I was told by the victims who are in the police that they also abuse the women that they arrest, or abuse the people in the homes that they search and things like this. So like you say, this is other instances where they don't really obey the law because they are the law. And that, of course, is a problem. It's almost, modeled on some TV shows where the police is seen as really representing the law, period.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you, colleagues, for that indulgence. Madame Stubbs, 2 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Justice Bastarash, another point in your report was about these doctors who committed numerous cases of assault and were allowed to keep treating patients. I just wonder if you can tell us, do you know whether they're still practicing today? Have your findings on that been reported for criminal investigations or to the appropriate medical body to begin revoking their licenses?
There were 2 doctors, one in Toronto and one in Halifax. In the Halifax case, it was reported to the provincial or the municipal police. It was investigated. It did go to the medical society, and they did nothing. Basically, they said, well, it's not very clear what they had the right to do and didn't have the right to do, things like this. The reason they weren't covered by my study was because to qualify, you had to be working for the RCMP. These were applying for jobs to be with the RCMP. I put in there that the government should compensate those women just like the other ones. And I did that because in spite of the fact that it's been 3 or 4 years since those doctors have been moved away, there still hasn't been anything done with regard to the victims. But I was told by government people that they're going to set up another process like mine for the victims of the 2 doctors. I hope they do it because they should.
Thank you, Madame Stubbs. Mr. Iacchino, 2 minutes, please. There we go.
You said that mental health remains highly stigmatized. In your report, you say that many victims need help, but they do not want to ask for help because they fear stigmatization. Do you think that if we were to implement a frequent psychological assessment would help lower the stigma as well as prevent more harm? Yes, that's what I recommended. I think that If everybody is subject to an assessment, then we will all understand that it's normal to go through such an assessment. Also, it is important that medical records remain confidential. One of the big problems is that doctors hired by the RCMP have often given those medical records to the RCMP assessors. So then female members of the RCMP would not want to go see the doctor or the assessor. So we have to rectify this situation. It's not complicated. An assessment should be mandatory for everybody. Thank you. I do not have any further questions. Ms. Michaud, you have 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So earlier, we talked about 15 reports that have been done in the last 30 years, and yet nothing has changed. So now I'm questioning the role of external bodies that are doing those reports, because even though recommendations are given, we see that changes can not only come from within. We do not know how the minister will deal with those recommendations. So it's a bit like the investigator that leads investigations and make recommendations. So now my question is it now time to give a little bit more power to those external bodies, and how could that be implemented? I'm not sure what external bodies you're referring to. I believe the minister has some powers that he can wield on the administration of the RCMP. I don't think there are any other external bodies that have been implemented. They didn't create a management committee. They created another type of organization, but that organization cannot really have any impact on the issues that are discussed here. So you're saying that it is the responsibility of the minister to do something about it, to implement an organization.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't hear that right off. Justice Bachelorette, I'm kind of disturbed to hear that there's a policy issue. You can change policies, but at the operational level, we've got what you have revealed to be serious criminal offenses occurring with impunity in an organization that's charged with enforcing the law on behalf of all Canadians. And you say that there's a requirement for outside pressure. It seems to me that if that can be going on and still goes on, this requires something perhaps more than that. Would you think that this calls for an inquiry? I mean, you were doing this as an assessment of damages and making these observations in your report, and we thank you for them. But in terms of outside pressure, asking the commissioner, giving her an advisory board, that doesn't seem to be pressure at all. And the toxic culture that gave rise to this impunity still exists. Does this call for a public inquiry?
Well, what I said in the report is that some of the women I interviewed, especially those in higher positions, did want me to recommend a royal commission or a commission of inquiry of some type. The reason I only said this is what they said is because I was restricted to deal only with the question of sexual harassment.
I invite you to suggest it now before us, or suggest whatever you wish to suggest.
But I thought myself that the minister read my report and understood what really needs to be done, that he would certainly take some kind of action. You know, if I could discover a list of people who weren't obeying the law and were committing these sexual crimes, I'm sure that inside the box they can find the same people. They can find that out, but they've got to have the political will to do it.
And perhaps additional powers.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Harris and Mr. Justice Bastarash. The people of Canada owe you a huge debt of gratitude. I've been a politician for 23 years, and I don't think I've ever sat on a committee that has dealt with a report that is so absolutely devastating and so profound that you have actually been amazing at how you've riveted the members of the committee for 2 hours. And colleagues are going to have to, we're going to have to take some advice as to where we go with this. But again, thank you, sir, for your work. And on behalf of the people of Canada, on behalf of my colleagues, we really appreciate the time you've spent with us.
I just want to add one thing, is that I didn't think there was the political response that I expected when I prepared the report and made it public. And this is why I'm very grateful for you to have me tonight, because I did have at least the opportunity to speak to some members of Parliament who can speak to other members of Parliament and their own party, because, you know, it has really nothing to do with the work that I had to do. It really is a problem for all Canadians. And I think one that is important enough that there should be stronger reaction to what's happened, and try to find out exactly what's happening now, where we stand now. Thank you.
Thank you. Your words are well taken. With that, colleagues, I'm going to adjourn. We'll meet again on Monday. We resume our study on racism, and then the final hour, some instructions to the analysts, and possibly, colleagues, we should give some thought to the words of the justice here, and be prepared to have some discussion about that. So, with that, meeting's adjourned. Again, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
You are. Jeez.